The COVID era of the world, from 2020 to 2024, is an era that I will never forget, and the world should never forget. In this video, I'm going to do a deep dive on the origin of COVID, the government's response to COVID, Operation Warp Speed, the science involved, the philosophy involved, the propaganda, the politics, and how the mainstream media and social media responded to COVID. Like many Americans, I am now imbued with an unceasing desire to make it my life's work to bring justice for all the people around the world who took the experimental pharmaceutical mRNA vaccine product and lost their lives. These companies that did this cannot be allowed to do business again on the earth. The people in government and in the private sector who are responsible for this cannot be allowed to partake in society, and now is the perfect time for me to release this video because people have already begun to forget that all of this happened, and justice will only happen if every citizen knows the truth and the public demands retribution. This is the greatest crime that I have witnessed in my life, and I will not sit idly by as the months and years go along without speaking about the horrors, the madness, and the needless death that I witnessed through both incompetence and malice on the part of the government, the medical system, the pharmaceutical companies, and the media. The seriousness of this subject cannot be understated. The censorship that I witnessed during COVID was brutal, but now it's time to set the record straight. As for the origin of COVID, it's clear that it came from China late in 2019. The media expected people to believe the narrative that it started by a person eating a bat in China. Over the years, it has become clear that the funding for the project which generated the virus came from the American government. Under the regime of Barack Hussein Obama, the United States banned virus weaponization research domestically. However, it continued to fund research into virus weaponization in China, primarily at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Through various institutions like the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and the NIAID, the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease, it has been proven, despite the media pretending that it hasn't been, that the central figures of Anthony Stephen Fauci and Peter Daszak, through the Eco-Health Alliance, were responsible for all of this. Dr. David E. Martin gave an address to the European Parliament that detailed the multi-decade joint venture between the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical companies, and the governments of creating the virus and the vaccine.
SARS is the research developed by humans weaponizing a life system model to actually attack human beings, and they patented it in 2002. When the CDC in April of 2003 filed the patent on SARS coronavirus isolated from humans, what did they do? They downloaded a sequence from China and filed a patent on it in the United States. Any of you familiar with biological and chemical weapons treaties knows that's a violation. That's a crime. In 2005, this particular pathogen was specifically labeled as a bioterrorism and bioweapon platform technology. What, you might ask, Dave, was the coronavirus poised for human emergence? It was WIV1. Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1. 4 patent applications of Moderna were modified to include the term accidental or intentional release of a respiratory pathogen as the justification for making a vaccine for a thing that did not exist. This was premeditated domestic terrorism stated at the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2015, published in front of them. This is an act of biological and chemical warfare perpetrated on the human race, and it was admitted to in writing that this was a financial heist and a financial fraud. Investors will follow if they see profit at the end of the process. But we've been specifically requested to ignore the facts. that over $10 billion have been funneled through black operations through the check of Anthony Fauci and a side-by-side ledger where NIAID has a balance sheet and next to it is a biodefense balance sheet equivalent dollar-for-dollar matching that no one in the media talks about.
The circus of masks and social distancing was honestly nothing compared to Operation Warp Speed. When it was announced, it didn't make any sense to me because vaccines typically take 5 to 10 years to develop and run safety trials. People need to ask themselves, if the solution to this global problem was free for everyone, who paid for it? Who paid for millions of doses of vaccines? And weren't these vaccines supposed to be stored at low temperatures to be effective? So as the name suggests, they wanted to do something that takes a decade in just a year. How were people not suspicious of this? The answer is the media told people to trust the government, trust the pharmaceutical companies, and trust the science. The government started partnering with businesses to offer incentives to take a pharmaceutical product masquerading as a vaccine, free donuts, burgers and fries, an hour with your favorite prostitute, or even a stimulus check. Every day it got worse. The media said that the vaccine would stop people from getting and spreading the virus. Those turned out to be complete lies. And to this day, 5 years later, the media has not been held responsible for lying about this. Scientists were speaking out about this early on in the process. And I'm no scientist. Now this is a disclaimer. I am not giving out any medical advice in this video. I'm not giving out any information regarding the treatment of a disease that anyone may have because I am not a doctor. But you didn't have to be a doctor to see that the first people who took the vaccine, from news reporters to politicians to professional athletes, were literally dropping dead on live TV. And for the first time for millions of people, the alarm bell started to go off. Bills safety Damar Hamlin essentially died during an NFL game. Sergio Aguero, one of the top all-time goal scorers in the Premier League, was forced to retire. Undefeated boxer Musa Yamak died of a heart attack in the ring during a fight. Marathon runners collapsed and died during marathons. A 19-year-old National Guard soldier died suddenly after completing a 2-mile run. Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Goshen died from a routine physical fitness test. And a magician named Arsenio Perro died on stage. One of the greatest rappers of all time, DMX, took the vaccine and died shortly afterwards. This was no longer about politics or science in my view. This was becoming the greatest medical crime in human history.
So this spike protein doesn't stay just in the deltoid. The spike circulates in your blood. It lands in multiple organs in the body. And you know what happens? That spike protein, without the body of the virus present. We did studies in lab animals. In the lab animals, just in injecting the spike with no body of the virus, the spike induced the same diseases COVID-19 induced, the same lung disease, the same vascular disease, the same heart disease, the same brain disease. The spike is the toxin. So again, why are we injecting something into the human body that is the toxin? It is the toxin. It causes the disease. This isn't a vaccine. On the right-hand side, see how much more purple and blue that is? That's all inflammation. Why? ACE2 receptors in that lung, spike binding to it, inflammatory response, immune system attacking your own body. Investigational vaccine. They keep lying to the American public by calling it a vaccine. They keep taking the word investigational off. It's what they call it in the emergency authorization. They keep not calling it what it is. Investigational, an experiment on humanity. And that's what they're doing, and I'm showing you why. Spike is a toxin, crosses the blood-brain barrier. Kind of like my brain cells to be where they are and not be blown apart, right? So why in the world would we put a toxin into the human body that's going to disrupt the blood vessels in your brain, allow the spike in there, it'll cause inflammation? The brain fog you hear about from the COVID patients, guess what? You hear about it in the post-vaccinated damaged individuals as well. Once you have heart damage, the heart does not heal itself. Okay, left-hand side, all the blue dots, inflammation. See that gray in the middle? That's early scarring. Guess what? Once a heart cell is damaged, it's damaged forever. It doesn't replace itself with another heart cell. It replaces itself with a scar. Liver, kind of need your liver to detoxify everything in your life. Same thing. Damage to the liver. See all that blue? That's inflammation. Doesn't belong there. Testes, kind of important for the next generation, right? As much as that looks like a lovely heart, see all the blue in it? Inflammation. Same thing in the ovaries. And in the Pfizer paperwork and application, it clearly states that in the rats there was a 16% decrease in fertility. That's the tragedy and the crime in all of this. They're pushing it. It's an experiment. It's emergency authorized. It's not approved. Humanity is the phase 3 trial. Insanity, we need to stop the insanity immediately. This is over. Game over.
24 hours after receiving her second dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, she was unable to move from the neck down.
Last month, a Tennessee woman who was left partially paralyzed after getting her second dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
Only 11 spoke with a local woman who says she lost feeling in much of her body just hours after getting Pfizer's COVID-19.
A BC man who says he suffered a rare COVID vaccine injury that left him paralyzed will be getting financial support from the federal government.
After a group claims they've experienced life-altering injuries that they believe are from the vaccine.
A shocking reaction to the COVID vaccine.
We used to go fishing, camping, do everything. We got the Pfizer vaccine because I thought it was to protect him. I thought it was the right thing to do. It was like playing Russian roulette. My government lied to me. They said it was safe. Now I go home to an empty house.
A person was diagnosed with COVID-19 back in December and then died just hours after getting the vaccine on Thursday. This news now causing concern in this community, now questioning the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine.
A local woman says her mother died 2 days ago after receiving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
And now she believes the dose is what caused her mother's sudden death.
Off the top at 6, the CDC is investigating the death of an Ionia County wife and mother who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
From smiling with her family to an agonizing hospital stay, 51-year-old Nicole Audia says the Johnson & Johnson vaccine sent her into a physical tailspin.
I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. I was out of work for 10. My heart will never be the same.
Parker McFadden is confined to her hospital bed at Vanderbilt.
Can you walk right now?
No, I can't walk. Less than 24 hours after receiving her second Pfizer COVID shot, she explains she lost her ability to move from her shoulders down.
All they know is that prior to my vaccine, I was healthy, I was whole. And then after my vaccine, I had complete paralysis of my body. I've regained the upper body strength and I'm working towards both toes moving on left and right.
A Summerland resident is frustrated that the government's vaccine injury support program is taking so long to go through his case. A year after he said he suffered from a rare neurological condition from the vaccine that left.
Some athletes, notably Aaron Rodgers and Novak Djokovic, refused to take the shot and then were ostracized or outright banned from competing. Other people started to stand up for their beliefs as well, rejecting the shots, such as Gina Carano, Joe Rogan, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. John Campbell, Dr. Ryan Cole, and of course Alex Jones, and many more were speaking out against what was happening.
As a doctor, I have never seen something so injurious to the human body. It invades the brain. It invades the heart. It causes brain and heart damage. It invades the bone marrow. It stimulates antibodies to actually start to attack our own platelets and our other cells in our body. It causes blood clotting and damage to blood vessels like we've never seen. Data from University of Pittsburgh suggesting it causes cancer. Since when do we have a protein that actually injures the brain, injures the heart, the bone marrow, the immune system, causes blood clotting, and potentially causes cancer in a single protein? It's a weapon. In fact, there are 3 papers, one by Farkas, published in Military Medicine, and 2 by Yen, published in preprint. They've actually concluded it is a bioweapon. It is a bioweapon. According to strict military criteria, it's a bioweapon.
There was no precursor to COVID. There was nothing to compare it to for most people. It was fundamentally different from something like 9/11 or a natural disaster or a mass shooting that happens in one day. This saga lasted for 4 years. When COVID was announced as a national emergency in March of 2020, I was living alone in Texas, and I had a rough idea of what I wanted to do with my life at that point. I was ready to join the Army and serve this nation and all of its citizens. However, COVID threw everything into question for me, just as it did for many others. My first impression of the situation was to think that everything would be fine, and that surely this would all pass over in just a few months. But that was a naive perspective. I was skeptical of what was happening with the government, and I had been listening to InfoWars for a long time. When they first announced the shutdown, the country that I love was unrecognizable. Under what law, under what pretense could they quarantine healthy people? Isn't quarantine for the sick? Why was the country closed for healthy people? I could see that what the media was doing was constant fear-mongering, and I was not afraid of getting the virus. I was listening to people from the beginning talk about the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin at defeating the virus, which could be obtained very cheaply and which have been proven over the course of 60 years to be safe medications. Dr. Peter McCullough testified to the Texas House of Representatives that most of the deaths that happened from COVID could have been prevented with early treatments with well-established drugs.
I'm the most published person in my field, which deals with the heart and the kidneys in the world in history. And when COVID-19 hit, I saw it as our medical Super Bowl. And I refused to let an illness, which lasted for 2 weeks at home, before they got sick enough to be hospitalized, I refused to let a patient languish at home with no treatment and then be hospitalized when it was too late. It was obvious. That was obvious in April that was the case. So I used the best tools or drugs available at the time. There's 2 bad outcomes to COVID-19, hospitalization and death. The second premise, if we don't do something before the hospitalization, we can never stop it. We can never stop it. I can tell you the interesting thing was there was 50,000 papers in the peer-reviewed literature on COVID. Not a single one told a doctor how to treat it. Not a single one. You get handed a diagnostic test. It says, here, you're COVID positive. Go home. Is there any treatment? No. Is there any resources I can call? No. Any referral lines, hotlines? No. Any research hotlines? No. That's the standard of care in the United States. That is a complete and total failure at every level. Okay, let's take the White House. How come we didn't have a panel of doctors assigned to put all their efforts and stop these hospitalizations? Why don't we have doctors who actually treated patients get together in a group and every week give us an update? Why didn't we have that? Why didn't we have that at the state level? Zero.
Knowing that we had the answer all along and watching the events unfold was maddening. For me, COVID was frustrating, dystopian, and sad in America, but the truth is that things were worse in other countries. I watched as Australians, Europeans, and Canadians were abused by their governments more severely than Americans were, and were arrested for posting their disagreement online, and in some cases arrested for not wearing masks. And it made me feel bad for the people that live in those countries, but it also made me glad to be not just an American, but a Texan.
As another lockdown begins, the UK is a country still trying to come to terms with the new variant of COVID-19. Up to 70% more transmissible. Just weeks ago, vaccine approval injected much-needed hope at the end of a most challenging year. New figures put the UK on course to exceed 100,000 COVID-related deaths before the end of the month.
And since they rolled out the vaccine program, Trump promoted the vaccine from the beginning. He was shilling for the vax, despite boos from his own supporters at his own rallies.
Trump's biggest failure was agreeing to this. I understand he was trying to counter Biden, but it's a horrible mistake Trump made. He's out right now pushing this damn warp speed. And notice they try to hedge their bets. They go, oh, if there is deaths, it's because Trump sped it up. I think Trump's been set up by this. They tricked Trump when he was saying, get me cures, get in there, take the controls off. No, sir, we can't do it. Well, there is this project, but which they had ready for decades. They now admit. He goes, good, do it. He was also like all the other therapeutics and ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. I mean, I know how Trump is, a super optimist. He got let into that, and I'm not being an apologist for Trump. That's what happened. And because he's so pig-headed, he won't now admit he got set up. We'll go over the top and we'll get Fauci and Daszak and Bill Gates arrested. But it's going to happen regardless now. You can see the momentum, I can tell you. Well, the FDA and HHS just banned the COVID shots, like I told you they do, for everybody but old people, so they can get rid of them. But they're going to get rid of that next. They're doing it in pieces.
But it's important to note that Trump did not implement the vaccine mandate, because Trump was out of office and Biden was in office when the vaccine mandates came out. And again, we can't call this a vaccine because it did not confer immunity. And although Trump praised it and said it was great, people knew that what was truly happening was blood clots, myocarditis, turbo cancer, recurring infections, immune system deficiency, exhaustion, Bell's palsy, strokes, reproductive disorders, and lowered fertility. When the 2020 election happened, we as citizens were supposed to believe that an old man in Joe Biden, who did not run a normal campaign, who basically sat in his basement and had very few speaking events, who made epic blunders along the course of the campaign, such as telling black Americans that if they didn't vote for him that they weren't black, and whose son was implicated in a bribery scheme with a Ukrainian oil company, on multiple occasions displayed signs of Alzheimer's disease and blatant forgetfulness and blatant cognitive decline, got the most votes of any candidate in the history of American presidential elections. And I'm sorry, I just to this day will never believe that that's what happened.
You got the vaccination?
Yeah.
Are you okay? I mean, you seem, no, it works. Or or the mom and dad, or the neighbor, or when you go to church, or when you're, no, I really mean it. There are trusted interlocutors. Think of the people. If your kid wanted to find out whether or not there's a man on the moon or whatever, something.
What was the outcome of Biden being named as the winner by the media? It was the vaccine mandates. Every business with more than 100 employees, which is most corporations, had to make sure that all of their employees got the shot or they couldn't go to work. The American military was forced to take it, but the vaccine mandates did not end with adults. The Biden syndicate announced that it was approved for children as young as 6 months old. And when the government did that, they crossed a line and made an enemy with me. Because in politics, it's one thing to destroy adults' lives by making them choose between their livelihood and a poisonous, potentially fatal experimental product. But when you bring children into the situation, it is pure evil and uncalled for. And it embodies the essence of the Democrat machine. They target children with their propaganda, their hormone replacements, and their poison shots because children cannot think for themselves, and their parents are living in a state of constant fear where they can't decide things rationally. It was one of the darkest moments in American politics. A rift was created in our society between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. It was meant to marginalize normal people. Unvaccinated people couldn't enter certain restaurants and businesses, and in some countries couldn't fly on planes. It was meant to create tension between people. So I sat through 4 years of Joe Biden, the masks, the vaccines, the obvious displays of dementia, finding mysterious bags of cocaine at the White House, and the COVID leaks that were coming out every day in the alternative media. But I was ultimately interested in the truth. And I thought that it was possible that what we were seeing in front of us was not really happening, and perhaps the Biden that was on TV was not the real Biden. But I did not have any way of knowing if it was the real Biden, or if it was an actor, or a clone, or something else. All I could know was that the hospitals, the nurses doing their dance videos... I mean, look at this shit. It was just ridiculous. You had all these nurses and doctors dancing. Why are they doing this? Why weren't they treating patients? Why were they taking time to make dance videos? The world completely lost its mind. And is this the way that people behave during a deadly pandemic? Why are they having dance parties? Why are they acting like nothing bad has happened? Why were there empty hospitals? People need to start to look at these moments from the COVID era and realize that this entire thing was a scam. Were also derelict in their duty as well. The more that I dove into the subject, the more that I realized that people were being put on ventilators and being given the wrong medicines while they were in the hospitals, because each hospital was being given a bonus for every COVID patient that they had, and every COVID patient put on a ventilator, and every patient who died of COVID at the hospital. But there was something clearly very wrong about all of this, because family members were not allowed to see their parents, their grandparents, their children, or their friends in their dying moments. As far as the media goes, people took to social media to post some of the most ridiculous things that I had ever seen in my life. I was finally able to schedule my COVID-19 vaccine today. I've never been more excited for a date than I am for this one with the Kroger pharmacist. Welp, can't say this is where I pictured being tonight. I felt off today. Then around dinner, I thought I was having a full-on heart attack, so my dad brought me to the ER. They said there's a chance I may have blood clots in my lungs. No answers, but hoping for good news. And then we've got this post here by Nate. Time for my third dose. Get boosted baby. # get vaccinated. Hello friends. Last night I went to the ER with fever, chest pains, and shortness of breath. I have pericarditis, a swelling of the tissue surrounding the heart. The doctor says this may be a reaction to the mRNA booster I received on Saturday. I'm doing fine and resting up. And look, the point is not to make fun of these people, but it's to show the chaos and the madness and the psychology of what was happening during this time. Like the girl who posted in the last thing, her life was being ruined by the lockdowns and by COVID, and that's why she said she was so excited to go get her vaccine. And people were boasting about taking the vaccine and were acting like this was the right thing to do, and then posting themselves in hospital beds. And that's not even the worst part. What we're about to get to is the people who posted their children taking the vaccine. And this is truly getting to the most messed up part of it, of all of this, in my opinion, because children had no idea what was going on, and these parents, in many cases, thought that they were doing the right thing and ended up hurting their children. There was a certain kind of sickness about people of the mind where they wanted to post pictures of their children who had just taken the experimental vaccine in hospital beds and showing symptoms of adverse reactions with strange looks on their faces and being proud of their own L's that they posted. And there were so many examples of this, people posting, "Go get the vaccine. Oh, look what happened to me. I'm in the hospital, but everyone needs to get the vaccine." There was such a strong cognitive dissonance in people. One of the things that's also very important to mention is that the government was able to deem certain businesses as essential and other businesses were not essential. So churches and schools were not essential, but liquor stores and corner stores were essential, because people still have to be able to get their whiskey and cigarettes and junk food. But if people were to gather and worship or meet at a bar, the government knew that people would start to figure out that what was going on was completely illegal, completely unconstitutional, and completely absurd in every possible respect, from the hospitals to the government to the media. And by preventing people from gathering, they prevented people from their fundamental right to assemble and to talk about the absurdities that were happening in our world. So what is the conclusion of all of this madness? The conclusion is that we need Nuremberg 2.0. We need military tribunals to convene, convict, and carry out sentences against all of the criminals involved in this massive global operation, which has killed millions of people and left millions of people broke and without their businesses. The economic damage, the health damage, the psychological damage is unbelievable. So for those of you who don't know, a little bit of more context on the Nuremberg trials. These were trials that were held against the German Nazis in the 1940s for crimes against humanity and war crimes. It was a military tribunal that was set up by Great Britain, the United States, France. In order for them to carry out this prosecution, they first had to establish a legal agreement on what grounds the trial would take place and on what grounds punishment conclusions would take place. The Nuremberg trials were an example of international law. We need to have something that is more high-tech than just what happened at Nuremberg. The point of doing a new Nuremberg is to put all of the people who are responsible for this up in front of the world so that we can see their faces, so that they can answer for their crimes. We need a more high-tech Nuremberg. We need all of the evidence to be presented in front of an international court of multiple countries with a new legal standard to define the fraudulent basis that COVID was unleashed upon the world, the fraudulent basis that the vaccine was released upon the world and the population, and all of the death and sickness that resulted from it has to be something that is prosecuted, litigated, and ultimately resolved. The citizens of this country and of all Western civilization need to wake up from their slumber and wake up from the illusions of watching Netflix and endless movies on streaming services and social media, which turns people's brains to mush. Wake up and demand that we have Nuremberg 2, because every single human rights code was violated. Informed consent was violated. The doctor's pledge to do no harm was violated. All of these violations against humanity have to have justice. We cannot move forward as a human species unless this era is addressed and the people who are responsible are punished severely. We have to have a resolution to this, and I will not quit until we have justice.